My brother used to call me the most boring person in the family because I always cried over his pranks. When he stuck gum in my hair, I cried. When he pulled the chair out from under me, slamming me down hard, I cried for 2 months lying face down. Mom and Dad brushed it off. Boys will be boys, they said. Learn to take a joke. You're cold and uncaring for an older sister. So I stopped crying. Even when he piled food onto my plate at dinner, I forced a grateful smile. But he had mixed in a big spoonful of peanut butter. The second I closed my bedroom door, a crushing pressure closed around my throat. I couldn't breathe. Angry red hives erupted across my skin, burning like fire. I collapsed onto the bed, my phone glowing in the dark. The browser history showed a desperate search. How bad is a peanut allergy? Consciousness faded. Through the wall, my brother laughed at his video game. In the living room, Mom and Dad watched a comedy. No one cared what I did behind my closed door. No one knew their daughter was fading out. In my next life, I don't want to be the punchline of a cruel joke. I want to be treated like a human being, just once. Ivy, get out here and eat right now. My mother's voice cut through the wooden door, dripping with irritation. I didn't move. It wasn't because I was giving her the silent treatment. I physically couldn't move. My body felt incredibly, unbearably heavy. Every muscle burned with a terrifying heat. I could feel the skin on my face stretching tight. My eyes were so swollen they had sealed shut into useless little slits. My lips were completely congested, so thick I couldn't open or close my mouth. My throat felt like someone had forced a mouthful of fire down it. Every attempt to pull in oxygen felt like swallowing fine thorns. Ivy, are you deaf? I said dinner is ready. She yelled again, louder this time. I could hear the sharp edge of anger in her voice. Her patience was gone. Mom, she's just throwing another tantrum. My brother Cole's voice floated from the dining table. He sounded completely relaxed, like he was talking about the weather. I just mixed a little peanut butter into her food. I just wanted to play a prank on her. A prank? He said it so lightly, as if secretly putting peanut butter in the food of someone with a severe allergy was exactly the same as putting salt in the sugar bowl. Just a small, funny science experiment. Cole, you know your sister is allergic. Why would you do that? My mother's voice didn't hold a single drop of real guilt, just a mild, powerless complaint. I just wanted to see what would happen. Cole sounded completely justified. The books make it sound so scary. I bet they were just exaggerating. Okay, enough. My mother cut him off. Ivy, come out and eat your dinner. Stop being so resentful toward your brother. I gave no answer. I wasn't being stubborn. My tongue had swollen to twice its size. The entire inside of my mouth was inflamed. I tried to force my jaw open, but all that came out was a pathetic, choked whimper, like a sad kitten that had just been abandoned on the street. Ivy, I'm warning you. Don't test my patience today. My mother's voice turned hard. If you refuse to eat, you're going to go hungry. Don't expect us to bring you a plate. Her footsteps moved away from my door. The clink of silverware against china echoed from the living room. They had started eating. The perfect family of 3, without me. I lay paralyzed on my bed, staring at the ceiling. There was a faint water stain right above me, vaguely shaped like a butterfly. I had stared at that stain countless times while growing up. Every time I felt overwhelmed, I would look at it until the tears stopped. But this time the tears slipped from my swollen eyes and rolled down my burning cheeks. Breathing was becoming impossible. I could hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. Thump, 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 like someone desperately knocking on a door that would never open. My phone slipped from my numb fingers and hit the carpet. I let my eyes close. Whatever, let it end. No one cared anyway. When my soul finally floated out of my body, my first thought was strangely calm. So this is what it feels like to leave. Every ounce of pain and suffocation vanished in a fraction of a second. I floated up near the ceiling, looking down at my own body on the bed. The girl lying there had her head tilted at a very strange angle. Her face was so swollen it was unrecognizable. Her lips had turned a sickly pale dark color. Her arms were covered in a massive reaction. The phone lay on the floor. The screen was still glowing. The search engine was stuck on the last thing I tried to read before I collapsed. Emergency first aid for allergic reaction. I floated through my bedroom door. I passed straight through the solid wood that no one had bothered to open. In the living room, my mother sat on the couch, scrolling on her phone. The coffee table was covered with half-eaten plates. Roasted chicken, green bean casserole, and a bowl of mashed potatoes. There was a full plate at my usual place. My mother hadn't cleared it. A fork still rested on the edge of the plate. She had no idea I would never sit at that table with them again in this lifetime. My father, David, sat beside her watching the evening news. The weatherman on the screen was predicting heavy rain for tomorrow. Is Ivy still not coming out? He asked casually, without even looking away from the television. Ignore her. You spoil her too much. My mother kept her eyes glued to her screen, her thumb scrolling distractedly. Cole just played a harmless prank on her. Is she really going to drag this out? Whether she's dragging it out or not, the girl is allergic. You know that. My father's tone was completely flat. Zero panic. Zero concern. He might as well have been saying the milk had expired. How bad could an allergy really be? It's not like she took something super toxic. She's just dramatic. My mother frowned in annoyance. She's been like this since she was little. The second she doesn't get her way, she locks herself in her room. Look at Cole. He's such a bright, happy kid, but having her around forces him to walk on eggshells. Floating nearby, I actually felt like laughing. Cole walking on eggshells? He certainly didn't look nervous when he used my toothbrush to scrub the toilet. He laughed harder than anyone when he sneaked into the fuse box and shut off the hot water while I was showering in the middle of winter. I was the one living in that house like I was navigating a minefield. He lived like a king who could do whatever he wanted. The only difference was who our parents chose to believe. Fine, I'll go check on her. My mother finally put down her phone and stood up from the couch. I floated behind her as she walked toward my bedroom door. She pushed it open just a little. The room was completely dark. The curtains were tightly closed. I could barely make out a silhouette curled up on the mattress. Ivy, are you coming out to eat or not? I didn't move. I had already left. Okay, stop pretending. Her voice grew even more exasperated. If you're not going to eat, I'm throwing it out. Don't come crying to me that you're hungry at midnight. She waited for 3 seconds. The figure on the bed gave no response. You are absolutely exasperating! She slammed the door. Her footsteps marched back down the hallway. She left. She didn't take even 2 steps inside. She didn't turn on the light switch to look at my face. If she had, she would have seen my pale, strange lips. She would have touched my hand and realized it was already growing cold. But she stayed in the doorway, 3 meters away, tossed out a few irritated words, and walked away. I stayed floating in the hallway, staring at the closed door. Mom, is she still not coming out? Cole chewed on a chicken wing, his mouth shiny with grease. He looked down the hallway toward my room. Who knows with her? She's just playing the victim. My mother started clearing the table. She scraped the leftover chicken into the trash. She picked up my untouched plate. She looked at it for a second, hesitated briefly, then scraped it straight into the trash too. Is she seriously mad? Cole's voice had a tiny fraction of guilt, but it vanished instantly. I literally only put a drop of peanut butter in her food. Is she really going to overreact this much? Overreact or not, you know she has that allergy. My mother stacked the dirty plates and carried them to the sink. Just don't do things like that again. That was it. No punishment, no lecture, no yelling that he could have seriously hurt his sister. Just a casual, don't do that again, said with exactly the same weight as telling him not to leave his dirty socks on the floor. I watched the entire exchange. I felt a strange sensation in my chest, a deep, hollow ache. I had already left. I had no heartbeat, so why did it still hurt? Mom, do you think she's actually sick or something? Cole's voice lowered. What could happen to her? Your sister has done this her whole life. My mother turned on the faucet. The strong stream of water almost drowned out her words. At the slightest inconvenience, she pretends to be sick. She paused to scrub a plate. Remember when you pulled the chair out from under her? She stayed in bed for 2 months saying she was hurt, and in the end, she was perfectly fine. Right? My soul floated into Cole's room. His dual monitors glowed brightly. A multiplayer shooter game was paused on the screen. He was reclining in his expensive gaming chair, a lollipop in his mouth. His phone vibrated. A message from his friend. Friend. Hey, how's your sister? Cole. She's fine. Just playing the victim for attention like always. Friend. Did your mom yell at you? Cole. Nah, my mom knows she's just a drama queen. Friend. Cool, we'll have to think of a better prank next time. LOL. Cole. Yeah, next time I'm going to steal her final project so she fails the class. Friend. LMAO. You're dangerous. I stared at the glowing chat bubbles. Something shattered deep in my chest. It wasn't anger. It was something much colder than anger. It was absolute smothering despair, realizing that, in their eyes, I wasn't even a human being. I was just a toy. A prop for their entertainment. Something they could break without even worrying about the consequences. Because my parents would never punish him. They would always, always take his side. I turned and floated out of his room. I no longer wanted to hear his laughter. I didn't want to know what other ways they planned to humiliate me. I was in another dimension. None of this should matter to me anymore. But why did it still hurt? Later that night, my mother came back to my door. This time, she knocked. Ivy, come out and take a shower. No response. If you don't answer me, I'm coming in. Still no response. She pushed the door open. The room filled with light. My mother stepped into the room and felt for the switch. The ceiling light flickered and then came on, bathing everything in a cold white glow. She stood in the doorway for exactly 3 seconds. Her eyes took a moment to adjust, and then she saw it. I floated near the ceiling, directly above my own body. I watched the exact moment her brain processed what her eyes were seeing. It wasn't instant. That surprised me. It took a full second, as if her mind had to translate the image into something it could understand. The girl on the bed, the color of her skin, her lips. The arms covered in dark hives. The unnatural position of her head. Ivy? Her voice came out strange, flat, as if the question were made of wet paper. She crossed the room in 4 strides and grabbed me by the shoulder. She shook me. Once, twice, 3 times. Ivy! This time her voice cracked in half like a dry branch. I didn't answer, because I couldn't anymore. My mother started screaming. Not words, just a long, torn sound that came from some deep place in her throat I had never heard before. Never in 16 years of life had I heard her make that sound. It was the kind of scream that can't be faked. The kind of scream that only comes out when something breaks permanently inside. David! David, come here! Come now! The sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway. My father appeared in the doorway with a chicken wing still in his hand. He dropped it on the floor without realizing it when he saw my mother bent over the bed. What? What happened? Call 911, call right now. My mother's voice was spiraling out of control. She's not breathing. Oh my God, David, she's not breathing. I watched my father run for the phone. His hand shook so violently it took him 3 tries to dial the 3 simplest numbers in the world. I heard his voice break as he described the situation to the operator. I heard scattered words. Anaphylaxis, 16 years old, unresponsive, room at the end of the hall. Cole appeared in the doorway. He froze. I saw the exact moment the color drained from his face. It was as if someone had emptied all the liquid from his body at once. That relaxed smile he always wore disappeared. His eyes jumped from my mother, to my father, to the phone in his hand, and then to the motionless figure on the bed. What's going on? What's wrong with Ivy? No one answered him. My mother was holding my body's hand between hers, rubbing it desperately as if the heat could bring me back. My father was still on the phone, giving the address in a broken voice. Mom? His voice sounded different, 3 years younger than he was. It wasn't the voice of the boy who an hour earlier had been texting his friend about the next prank. It was the voice of a scared child who suddenly didn't understand what he had done. Too late for that, I thought from the ceiling. The sirens arrived sooner than I expected. 2 paramedics burst through the front door with a wheeled stretcher. My mother guided them, shouting, toward my room. I watched them work with quick, precise movements, connecting monitors, checking my pulse, talking to each other in terminology I couldn't fully decipher. How long has she been like this? I don't know. My mother covered her mouth with both hands. I don't know. She was in her room. I told her to come out for dinner. I thought she was just mad. I thought she was just... Her voice broke. She couldn't finish the sentence. The paramedic looked at her for a second. He said nothing, but his silence said everything. Is she allergic to anything? The second one asked while checking my arms. My mother took too long to answer. Peanuts, she finally said. She's allergic to peanuts. Was she exposed to peanuts tonight? A terrifying silence filled the room. My mother slowly turned toward Cole, who was still standing in the doorway with his arms hanging at his sides. She looked at him with an expression I had never seen on her before. It wasn't anger. It was something worse than anger. It was the horror of someone who has just understood something they can't unlearn. Cole? Her voice came out in a raspy whisper. Cole, did you put peanuts in her food? Cole didn't answer. His silence was the most eloquent answer he had ever given in his life. Answer me. Did you put peanuts in it? It was just a spoonful. His voice cracked in the middle. I just wanted to see... I didn't know that. The books always make it sound so exaggerated. He didn't finish. Because there was no way to finish that sentence that wouldn't completely condemn him. I floated toward him. I stopped right in front of his face. Obviously, he couldn't see me, but I watched him closely. I watched the reality of what he had done land on him, layer by layer, like slabs of concrete falling onto his shoulders. Him, who had always walked through that house as if the entire world were his personal stage. Him, who had never faced real consequences for anything he did to me. Him, who 30 minutes earlier had been texting his friend about the next prank they would pull on me. For the first time in his life, Cole was truly afraid. And the most disturbing part of it all was that I felt no satisfaction. Not a single gram. Only that cold, empty ache that followed me like a shadow even after death. The pain of having wanted more than anything else in the world for someone in that house to look me in the eyes and say, "I see you. You're real. You matter." Just that. Nothing more complicated than that. The paramedics lifted me onto the stretcher. They started moving me toward the exit. My mother followed the stretcher, gripping the edge with white knuckles. My father walked behind, phone pressed to his ear. I heard my grandmother's name. I heard the word hospital. I heard the word critical. I stayed floating in the center of the empty room while everyone left. The ceiling, the butterfly-shaped water stain. How many times had I looked at it from below? How many times had I counted its irregular edges while waiting for the pain of being me to become bearable? Now I looked at it from above, upside down, and it was exactly as lonely in both directions. Cole was the last to leave the room. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at the bed, the rumpled sheets, the phone still lying on the floor with the screen on. He stepped inside, bent down, and picked it up. The screen still showed that search I had tried to read before losing consciousness. Emergency first aid for anaphylactic shock. I watched him read the words, watched his eyes move from left to right, once, twice, as if he needed to read them twice to believe them. He dropped the phone. He covered his mouth with his hand, and he made a small, choked sound I had never heard come from him before. It wasn't crying. It was something that came before crying. The sound a person makes in the exact instant they realize something they can't undo. He ran down the hallway. I was left alone in the empty room, the butterfly stain on the ceiling, the phone glowing on the floor, and then something began to form in some invisible corner of this strange state between worlds, a quiet certainty, small as a seed buried under meters of earth, but there, beating with a faint light in the total darkness, persistent, stubborn. This still wasn't the end. I don't know how this works. No one gives you a manual when you die. I discovered I could follow my body, as if there were an invisible thread tied between my soul and that swollen purple shell the paramedics carried to the ambulance. It wasn't a conscious decision. It simply happened. I found myself floating above the roof of the ambulance as it raced through the streets, sirens cutting through the night traffic. Inside, the paramedics worked nonstop. One of them was young. No older than 30, dark hair flattened under a blue cap. His name was Mark, according to the badge on his jacket. He was the one who connected the first epinephrine injection. He was the one who, while checking my free-falling vital signs, muttered something under his breath that the others didn't hear. This wasn't an accident. I heard it crystal clear, as if he had spoken it directly into my ear from the other side of death. We arrived at the hospital. The emergency doors slammed open. They transferred me to a stiffer stretcher with wheels that squeaked against the linoleum. The invisible thread tightened as they rushed me down an endless hallway of white lights. I floated behind, stuck to that thread like a balloon tied to a little girl's wrist. My parents arrived 10 minutes later. Cole came with them. They stayed in the waiting room, a small space with cream-colored plastic chairs and a television hanging on the wall that no one watched. My mother sat with her hands clasped over her knees, staring at the floor. My father paced back and forth. Cole pressed himself against the farthest wall, arms crossed over his chest, staring at his own shoes. No one spoke. The waiting room didn't interest me. I followed Mark. I watched him fill out the medical report on the tablet, how he wrote every detail with a meticulous precision his colleagues didn't apply with the same care. Severe anaphylaxis, exposure to known allergen, estimated time without attention, between 1 and 2 hours. Prognosis, critical. Then he wrote something in the additional observations field that made something inside me light up like an emergency signal in total darkness. Documented allergic patient. Exposure apparently deliberate by family member. Recommend notification to social work. He wrote it. He saved it, without hesitating for a second. I stayed floating in front of his face for a long moment. This man I had never seen in my life. This stranger who arrived too late to save me, but who, unlike everyone who had known me forever, saw the situation with exactly the clarity it deserved. Deliberate. A single word. But it was the first time anyone had called what Cole did by its real name. Mark left the emergency area and walked toward the waiting room. My parents stood up when they saw him approaching. "How is she?" my mother asked in a shattered voice. "Stable for now," Mark replied, but it was extremely serious. A few more minutes and she wouldn't have made it. My mother let out a sob. My father closed his eyes. I need to ask you some questions, Mark continued. His tone was calm, clinical, but there was something under that calm that was hard as concrete. Who prepared your daughter's food tonight? The silence that followed lasted exactly too long. It was a family dinner, my father finally said. We all ate the same thing. Did anyone in the family know she was allergic to peanuts? The whole family knows, my mother said, since she was little. And yet the peanuts ended up in her food? Another silence. This time my mother turned slightly toward Cole, just a turn of the head. Barely noticeable, but Mark saw it. I saw it. Cole was still pressed against his wall, staring at his shoes. I'm going to ask a social worker to come talk with you, Mark said. It's standard protocol in cases like this. Standard protocol. He said it with perfect neutrality, but everyone in that room knew it wasn't standard. It was a warning, a line drawn in permanent ink on an official document that no one could erase later. I moved away from the waiting room and floated back down the hallway of white lights. I followed the invisible thread to the room where my body was, connected to machines that breathed for me with a constant mechanical rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. I stayed floating near the ceiling, looking down, and then something strange happened. I began to remember. Not like normal memories, as if time had folded in on itself, and the entire past flowed into me at once. I saw my room again, the butterfly stain, the phone falling from my numb fingers, and before that, dinner, the plate, the fake smile I forced when Cole served me, and before that, the afternoon, the morning, the entire years stacked one on top of the other. Every prank, every tear I swallowed in silence, the gum in my hair, the pulled chair, the fractured coccyx, 2 months face down. Boys will be boys, learn to take it, and me taking it, always taking it, becoming someone smaller each time, taking up less space, making less noise, until I almost disappeared before anyone helped me do it. The full cycle passed in front of me like pages of a book flipped through at high speed. And at the end of the last turn, at the exact point where the story returned to its own beginning, I saw it all with brutal clarity. I had carried everything, always, and they had never carried anything. That was about to change, because now there was someone who had written the word deliberate on an official report. Now there was a thread that someone else was holding, someone who wasn't from my family, someone who had no reason to cover for them. And somewhere inside that purple, swollen body connected to all those machines, something flickered, something that shouldn't have survived. It did anyway. Beep, beep, beep. I came back. I don't know how to explain it any other way. I simply came back. It wasn't dramatic. There was no bright light, no tunnel, no voices calling me from the other side. It was more like when you fall asleep without realizing it, and suddenly wake up with your cheek stuck to the pillow, without remembering the exact moment your eyes closed. One instant, I was floating near the ceiling, looking at my own body connected to machines, and the next instant I was that body. Heavy, locked inside flesh and bone that hurt in every centimeter, with tubes in my nose and an IV in my arm, and a constant beeping in my ears that took me several seconds to recognize as my own heart. Beep, beep, beep. It was still there. I didn't open my eyes right away. I couldn't. My eyelids felt like they were glued shut with cement, but I could hear. And what I heard from the first second of consciousness was enough to let me know that something outside that room had changed irreversibly while I was on the other side. Voices in the hallway. A voice I didn't recognize. Woman. Professional tone. Calm, but with an edge that cut under every word. Are you telling me no one checked on your daughter for more than 2 hours after they served her the food? And my mother's voice, but different, stripped of that familiar certainty that always made her sound like she was right about everything. We thought she was just... that it was an overreaction. She sometimes what? Silence. Sometimes what, ma'am? Sometimes she puts on a show for attention. My mother's voice came out barely as a thread, and the moment the words existed in the air, I could feel how she herself heard them for real for the first time. Not as a reasonable explanation, but as what they really were. There was a long pause. And this time you also thought it was a show? There was no answer. The woman in the hallway was named Carmen Reyes, I found out later. When I finally could open my eyes enough to see the badge hanging around her neck, social work, child protective services. She was a woman about 45 with her hair pulled back in a tight bun and a tablet in her hand where she wrote nonstop. I had seen her before, floating, but seeing her from inside my own body, from this side of the world, gave her a completely different weight. She was real. This process was real. I heard her ask my father the same questions. I heard him answer with short, evasive phrases that sounded smaller and smaller under the weight of her questions. I heard the exact moment Carmen Reyes stopped writing. She let the silence stretch for a full 3 seconds, and then said in that calm, cutting voice, "Did your son know that his sister is allergic to peanuts?" "Yes," my father admitted. "And he did it anyway?" "It was a joke. He didn't understand the seriousness. Your daughter almost died, sir." With all due respect, the seriousness is documented in the medical record. I heard my father say nothing. It was in that moment that I heard Cole. He was somewhere farther down the hallway, but his voice still reached me, broken, unrecognizable. The boy who 3 hours earlier had been texting his friend about the next prank they would pull on me now sounded like someone had ripped something fundamental from the center of his chest. "I didn't know," he was saying. "I swear I didn't know it was going to be that bad. The books always say it's dangerous, but I never imagined that." "Did you know she was allergic?" Carmen Reyes's voice, direct. "Yes." "Did you know that peanut allergies can be fatal?" A pause. "Yes." "And you did it anyway?" Cole's silence lasted so long it seemed I could hear something collapsing inside him. Not the dramatic fall of someone who surrenders with dignity, but that kind of silent, slow collapse, like when a building starts sinking from the foundation and the exterior still looks whole for a few seconds before everything crashes down at once. "Yes," he finally said, a single syllable. But it was the first time in 16 years of history between us that Cole told the truth without anyone forcing it out of him. I stayed looking at the ceiling of the hospital room, different from the ceiling in my room. No stains, no butterflies, just a smooth white surface that told me nothing. And yet I couldn't help feeling something move in the center of my chest, something that wasn't the beeping of the machines or the physical pain that was still there, dull and persistent. It was something more like a door that had been locked for years and that someone at last had pushed from the outside. Carmen Reyes entered my room 20 minutes later. She found me awake, or something close to awake, eyes half open, throat still so swollen that speaking was impossible, but conscious, present. She approached slowly. She sat in the chair beside my bed. She didn't act surprised to see me awake. She didn't exaggerate either. She just took out her tablet and looked at me with that direct gaze that, I discovered, was her natural way of existing in the world. "Hello, Ivy. My name is Carmen. I'm a social worker. You don't have to talk if you can't. Just nod if you can hear me." I nodded. "Good. I need you to know something important." She paused. "What happened to you tonight is being investigated as an incident of abuse. Not as a prank, not as an accident. You didn't do anything wrong. Do you understand?" I nodded again. And this time something in my eyes must have given me away, because she continued in a tone just slightly softer, without losing that professional edge that made her trustworthy, precisely because she didn't pretend everything was going to be fine. "This doesn't end tonight. The report is already filed. The process has already begun. No one is going to be able to make this disappear." A short pause. "Has anyone ever done something like this to you before?" The question floated in the air of the room. I remembered the gum in my hair, the pulled chair, 2 months face down, the toothbrush scrubbing the toilet, the cold water in the middle of winter, the years and years of boys will be boys and learn to take it, and you're cold for an older sister and you're dragging this out and she always puts on a show. I couldn't speak. But I slowly raised my left hand, with all the effort it took to move a single finger, and spread all my fingers open. 5. Just as a symbol, just to say, more than you can imagine. Carmen Reyes looked at it. She wrote it on her tablet without taking her eyes off me, and then she said something that no one in 16 years of life had said to me with that specific conviction: "I believe you." I spent 9 days in the hospital, 9 days of white ceiling and constant beeping and nurses who changed the IV bags with a silent efficiency that I found strangely comforting. No one in that hospital expected me to smile. No one asked me to tough it out. They just came in, did their job, and left. It was the simplest form of being treated like a human being, and yet it was more than I had received at home for years. Carmen Reyes came back 3 times. The first, with more questions and her tablet. The second, with a children's attorney who explained to me in simple, direct words what was going to happen from now on. The third time she came alone, without a tablet, and sat in the chair beside my bed with a thin folder in her hands. "Ivy, I want to explain to you what the judge decided." By then I could talk. My throat was still sensitive, but the words came out. "Tell me." I answered. Cole was 14 years old. That kept him in the juvenile system. But what he had done, with the documented medical history, with his own confession recorded in front of Carmen Reyes, with the messages his friend had carelessly filtered into a school group chat that same week, couldn't be treated as a prank. The judge ordered mandatory psychological evaluation, community service, and 2 years of supervised probation. Any additional incident meant detention. My parents received supervision from Child Protective Services for 18 months, mandatory parenting classes, monthly unannounced home visits. And I, until the supervision process demonstrated that the environment was safe, would go live with my grandmother Elena. I listened to all of that sitting upright in the hospital bed, without crying, without trembling, with that strange calm I discovered in the days between death and return, that serenity that comes from having touched absolute bottom and climbed back up anyway. Do you have any questions? Carmen asked. No, I said. Thank you. The day they discharged me, my parents were in the waiting room. I saw them from the hallway before they saw me. My mother had dark circles under her eyes I had never seen on her. My father had a hunched posture I also didn't recognize. They didn't look powerful. They looked like what they really were. Two people who for years took the easiest path and now carried the weight of what that comfort had cost them. Cole wasn't there. I didn't ask why. My grandmother Elena arrived 5 minutes later. She was 72, with completely white hair and the safest arms I had ever known in my life. When she hugged me in the hospital hallway without saying a single word, I felt something that had been clenched inside my chest for 16 years finally, at last, let go. It wasn't the victory I imagined when I was a little girl. When I was little, I fantasized about elaborate revenge, about Cole falling spectacularly in front of the whole school, about my parents repenting on their knees, about someone arriving and shouting the truth so loud it would echo in every room of that house. None of that happened. What happened was quieter, more bureaucratic, slower, but also more permanent. An official document says that what Cole did was deliberate. That document exists. No one can open it and rewrite it. No one can enter that file and change the word deliberate to harmless prank. It's there, in ink, with a date, with signatures, and sometimes justice doesn't arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a social worker with a tablet and a badge around her neck, who simply writes what she sees without anyone asking her to. I lived with my grandmother Elena for the next 8 months. I slept in a small room with a window that looked out on a garden where she grew tomatoes. I ate breakfast every morning without fear. I showered with hot water in winter. I kept my things in the drawers without finding that someone had rummaged through them. I did homework in silence without expecting the door to burst open. I was, for the first time in my life, simply a girl living in a house. Not the punchline of a joke, not someone's experiment, not the dramatic sister who put on a show. Just me. What I learned in those 9 days between the ceiling of my room and the ceiling of the hospital is something no one taught me in any class. Silence doesn't protect the people you love. Silence protects the one who does the harm. Every time I swallowed a tear so I wouldn't give Cole the satisfaction. Every time I smiled at the plate of poisoned food so my parents wouldn't say I was dramatic. Every time I closed my bedroom door and decided not to bother anyone with my pain, I was building the shield that protected them. Not me. The most dangerous person in that house was never me with my allergies and my tears. It was the silence everyone expected me to keep. I fractured my coccyx and said nothing. I almost died and couldn't say anything. It was a stranger in an ambulance who said what I never could. So if there's something to take from this story, it's this. You don't owe silence to anyone. You don't owe toughness to anyone. You don't have to become someone smaller so another person can fit in the same space. And if the world you're in has no room for your pain, then that isn't your world. Yours is somewhere else, sometimes farther than you'd like, but it exists.